I think it's worth pursuing and trying to see if there's an effect of microdoses in humans, because if there is an effect of these drugs that are not psychedelic driven, then we know that it's not the psychedelic effect per se that is part of relieving people of, for example, depression or obsessive compulsive disorder. But it may be something pharmacological, and then we can go in and redesign the drugs, right? So if from my side, I see the psychedelic effect as a side effect, because a lot of people, and particularly people with anxiety or obsessive compulsive disorder, doesn't really want to get into a psychedelic experience. Maybe they're afraid enough stuff is going on in their head to do this. So it's beneficial to have other drugs that can help these people, especially drugs that don't have a psychedelic effect, and in that way can help people who are feeling a lot worse than just regular human beings.
I mean, I have no opposition, and in fact, I have a supportive, like, go get them, let's do it, for finding, what are they called, like third gen psychedelics or something, like psychedelic drugs that don't produce psychedelic effects.
Non-psychedelic.
Right. So there's a lot of, I see a lot of utility for that. There's another aspect for me, though, that my heart hurts a little bit when I hear the psychedelic effects of something like mushrooms, or to be described as a side effect, like an adverse effect, in contrast to the sort of like the key point and purpose of consuming this substance or molecule, especially since, and
it depends on what your key point and purpose for consuming the drug is, right? So if your key point and purpose is to have the psychedelic experience, then of course it's not a side effect, then it's the effect. But then you will have a side effect that's called increased blood pressure and increased heart rate, because you will also get that, and that is definitely a side effect of the drugs as well.
Right. So, I will also get that riding a bike vigorously. Yes. I would get that. I've heard this example of, like, if you took somebody's blood measures and like all of their vitals in the middle of a really intense workout, and all you knew were those measured, you'd be like, oh my God, this person's dying. But actually, this is a part of the sort of like stresses and the challenges that over time create resilience and health and well-being, when they're contained within a certain sort of like boundary that prevents injury psychologically, physically. And to me, I think, I can appreciate, and I see there's a lot of value in developing psychedelic-based drugs that don't have psychedelic effects, because they could have a lot of utility. And simultaneously, I think one could go in not for the psychedelic effects, but for the very same sort of like resolutions on the other side that somebody else is going in to take the microdose for and not have effects. And the psychedelic effects, the experiential aspects of that, playing an important sort of core aspect of those resolutions. And in that way, I think generally it pushes my bias edge, the sort of like the try and eliminate the psychedelic aspect of the drug, because I think it goes back to a kind of bias in certain areas of science and society, where anything that alters your mind outside of a particular window of allowance represents like a problem, rather than represents an opportunity for a different way of being or experiencing the world.
I think it may be because you see the word side effect in a negative view. I don't see it as in a negative view per se. It's just not the effect that we intend to get, right? So if we intend to get an effect on compulsive actions, then anything other than that would probably be a side effect. So I don't think it's bad. And when we're trying to develop new drugs without psychedelic effects, we're also not trying to remove drugs that have psychedelic effects. I think there's pros and cons for both. And I also think, so I've been thinking about this a lot, because it's a question that comes up a lot as well. And there's definitely some aspects of the psychedelic experience that is really useful in some disorders of the mind, or some places, and there's definitely other places where it may not have a big impact. So in one end of the scale, you would have something like headache or Horton's headache, where we know that the vasoconstriction is probably what is doing the thing, and that is probably has the healing effect of Horton's headache is probably nothing to do with the psychedelic experience. Where on the other end, you would have something like end of life anxiety, where you have this existential crisis and you know you're going to die. And then I think having the psychedelic experience is probably the most meaningful thing you can do at that point in life.
Right. I mean,
So,
if I'm on my deathbed and someone says, okay, well, we could give you this drug, but the side effect is if you have a mystical encounter of like, you know, becoming and merging with God and knowing that your life continues even as your life ends. Or I could give you this other drug that does the same thing pharmacologically. You just won't have you won't have any experience at all, and you'll just feel nice. You'll feel less compulsive. I mean, like as much as it would terrify me, and even the idea of being on my deathbed, of course, there's going to be a lot of fear and anxiety, you know, associated to that for most people. I'll probably still choose the one that puts me at my utmost challenges and meets me with God than the one that might relieve it just a little bit. Yeah.
But maybe that's because you are at ease with God as you are now, or at ease with the whole thing. I mean, I could imagine some people that don't want to go there before they die. Maybe they want to die in a different way. So,
yeah, and
but that's a big
fair
question.
enough. Fair enough, right? And we're like, wait, we're not going to come to the absolute conclusions on the relevance of God in this conversation.
No.
Why are we even talking after all?